Okay, so welcome back. This is part two of the Bourdieu lecture. We're starting from page 653 and moving forward from there. So this video begins with a subsection called Price Formation and the Anticipation of Profit. So right off the bat, in this first paragraph, he drops his word habitus. And if you know what habitus is, this section makes a whole lot of sense much quicker. So remember when we were talking earlier about strategy not being totally conscious, but more so pre-reflexive and practical? So you got individuals moving through society making decisions. Now, this concept, habitus, problematizes this individual society dichotomy and constructs them relationally as two dimensions of the same reality. So this is where you hear the phrase, habitus is society inscribed into the body. We can view habitus as practical dispositions that persons from particular classes are socialized into from a very early age. So habitus tends to guide individual actions within particular structures as we learn to anticipate chances of success or failure in any particular given situation. These chances can generally lead to the limits of personal aspirations or expectations from life. So we know stuff is more than likely to happen or more than likely not to happen. So this alone will have the effect of reproducing structures people might want to break free from. For example, being from a lower social class and wanting to go up into a higher social class. So while habitus is durable, which is Bourdieu's word, and it's difficult to change, it does not determine social action. But we can see people predicting chances of success. So action can be described as strategic improvisation, as opposed to a complete submission to the rules and structures of society, and also it's also not totally rational calculation. So now we combine the idea of habitus together with language, or the language habitus. Now, importantly here, language cannot be separated from the body and the forms of capital secured by the individual. So we always take into consideration the entire social personality and this social person and the position that they occupy in this greater field of power or market. For example, George W. Bush already had plenty of social and symbolic capital to relax his speech in public. Something he was made fun of, but also something he was admired for because he was seen as a regular person. On the other hand, someone on the brink of moving up a social class might tend to hyper-correct their speech in an effort to gain legitimacy. Or, if the chances of success are so utterly bleak, maybe a person might just totally shut down in a situation and not speak at all. So these are all strategies at different levels of awareness. But they're guided by our practical chances to succeed within a field of power relations. So this is the next word we should look at, field. Okay, so another tricky thing about this is Bourdieu often uses field and market interchangeably, but there are subtle differences here. Now, a field is an arena of struggle amongst actors, positioned differently in rank and hierarchy, which corresponds to the actors' forms of capital. Now, I can only guess that when Bourdieu uses the the word market instead of field, he intends to foreground the ideas we have about competition and circulation and consumption, all of these aspects of a field. Now, remember, the language of the market is metaphorical, but also at times is concrete. So that's a whole other debate. Is it metaphor or is it real? I don't know. I think it doesn't really matter. It depends on the situation. So maybe there's a social life of metaphors out there or something, some other kind of way you want to approach that. But let's think of it primarily as metaphor. So when Bourdieu uses the word market, this doesn't wholesale import economic meanings from the market, from the whole strand of academia that's about economics. So it doesn't import everything like the laws of supply and demand, right? So remember, actors are moving through everyday life, making practical decisions guided by the habitus. When we talk about fields and markets, we must always keep in mind habitus. It's the interaction between capital, habitus, and the field, which creates the thing that he calls practice, or makes possible different practices. So, thinking about everything I just said, what happens when language itself becomes an object susceptible to actors wanting to control its legitimate representations? What we get is a struggle over what kind of linguistic competence, what kind of language use is the most legitimate. So a person who controls this kind of competence is recognized as controlling this competence and is said to hold cultural and symbolic capital. The persons or institutions that are recognized as controlling the most legitimate form of competence will in some sense occupy the highest ranks of a field or a market. In some sense, these persons or institutions control the field itself, or they control the game which actors must play. And there is profit and there's distinction in these high ranks. These actors will want to protect their forms of capital and struggle to maintain themselves, to maintain their rank. So what this means is they will attempt to control the market. They will attempt to limit some from entering the linguistic market in the first place, or they might try to exclude more and more people from the market. Like I've mentioned before, the habitus of some actors may lead them to simply withdraw themselves from the game before even attempting to play. This is what the section called censorship and formality, and also the section called skill and recognition, this is what that stuff is about. And finally, the last paragraph, or the last section on linguistic capital and the body. I think this is an extremely important part in that it firmly situates language and language use as not something abstract. Remember, we were talking about that abstract realm of the language system. This firmly situates language at a very, very basic level as something that comes out of your body, that is materially embodied through the voice at a very basic level, right? It's connected to your body, which means also that your body has been socialized in a particular way from birth. So acquiring new linguistic practice is not as easy as learning vocabulary lists or learning lists of grammar rules. It's it requires becoming accustomed. It requires becoming accustomed to and gaining a wide competence of new bodily dispositions that might not be very similar to the dispositions already inscribed into your body. It might be very, very different from your individual and your social class habitus. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. You got to read this a few times to make sense of it. I've probably read this piece going on, 10 times. I still get new stuff out of it each time that I read it. It's an awesome piece, very important to linguistic anthropology in particular, and language studies stuff. So I am Mike. I will see you around for the next lecture.